Status quo bias is our preference for situations that remain unchanged in the absence of pressure to change them. Status quo bias is different from another bias I introduced in my earlier video, omission bias, which is a preference for inactivity. Status quo bias specifically refers to a favoring of current circumstances, often at the expense of future possibilities. While omission bias prevents action, status quo bias actively discourages change, even when change would be the most logical choice. Our brains function primarily as prediction machines, constantly gathering information from our environment and our past to make educated guesses about the future. This predictive capability is fundamental to our survival and efficient functioning. Neurons, the basic units of the brain, are consistently receiving, processing, and transmitting information. Through synaptic connections, neurons communicate with each other by sending and receiving signals. Those signals are influenced by both immediate sensory input and stored information from our past experiences in our memory system. Over time, patterns emerge in the neuronal activities which the brain uses to predict future events and outcomes. For example, if you touch a hot stove and your brain quickly associated with pain, the next time you come close to a hot stove, your brain predicts that touching it will result in pain again, prompting you to avoid it. In essence, the brain constantly updates its internal model of the world, refining its predictions based on new data and experiences. Because our brains are wired for predictability, stability in our environment allows the brain to consume fewer cognitive resources, which is more energy efficient. It's no wonder that the current state of affairs is often used as a reference point. Changes to this baseline can be cognitively taxing and are perceived as a potential loss, triggering stress responses in the brain. For leaders, understanding the pull of the status quo can be essential in decision-making processes. At times, keeping things as they are serves a logical purpose. A practice or strategy that has consistently produced positive results may not require immediate change. However, it is crucial to question whether the comfort of the status quo is clouding better judgment. Could sticking to the current plan actually prevent future opportunities or perpetuate existing inefficiencies? In organizations, leaders frequently face a difficult choice when considering change. Sometimes they resist because of complex, impending adjustments that seem too daunting. Other times, there may be a vested interest in preserving the current state of affairs. Regardless of the reason, it's important for leaders to examine whether the status quo is serving the best interest of the organization and its stakeholders. Your susceptibility to the status quo bias can vary depending on your role as a decision maker. For example, think about a book in your house that you have not read for years. Who is more likely to discard it, you or your spouse? The underlying factor here is the value you ascribe to that book, influenced by what is known as endowment effect, a mental shortcut I introduced in my previous video. The endowment effect refers to our tendency to place a higher value on objects simply because we own them. Due to the endowment effect, you may find it more difficult than your spouse to discard the book. Moreover, loss aversion also plays a role in the status quo bias. Loss aversion is our tendency to prefer avoiding losses over obtaining equivalent gains. Our brain's aversion to loss makes us more cautious and inclined to maintain the status quo. For example, you're more likely to maintain the status quo of your investment portfolio than your financial advisor would recommend. The differential value you place on your assets and your heightened sensitivity to loss make you more resistant to change. Another factor that contributes to the status quo bias is the cognitive energy required to justify a change, particularly in formal or public settings. The human brain is a high energy organ, and it often follows the principle of least effort. This principle suggests that given multiple paths, the brain chooses the one requiring the least cognitive resources. From this perspective, the status quo is cognitively economical. Instead of spending mental energy to defend a new proposal or navigate the risk of a change, it becomes easier to maintain the current state of affairs. Let's look at how status quo bias influences hiring decisions and limits organizational growth. Well, many organizations aim for demographic diversity. There is a difference between demographic diversity and diversity of viewpoints. Demographic diversity can serve as a proxy for diverse viewpoints, but demographic diversity does not necessarily translate into diversity of viewpoints. In a political party, we can have party members who are demographically diverse. On the surface, this would appear to be a model of inclusion and diversity. However, if everyone agrees on the same policy, ideological stances, and methods of governance, the party is less likely to identify blind spots. The party is missing out on the benefits that come from diverse viewpoints. While demographic diversity can contribute to diverse viewpoints, it is the presence of diverse perspectives in itself that broadens the choice set and leads to better decision outcomes. As we make hiring decisions, we are also influenced by the conformity effect, which is our tendency to align our beliefs and behaviors with those of a group. Conforming to social norms activates the brain's dopaminergic reward system, making it a mentally rewarding experience to fit in. Hiring panels and committees may inadvertently give preference to candidates who are a cultural fit, prioritizing compatibility over competence and merit. Rather than bringing on board a candidate who offers fresh perspectives and challenges the norm, there is a tendency to hire those who will easily adapt to the existing organizational culture. This preference is also amplified when hiring through word-of-mouth recommendations, which often result in candidates that resemble the current team in terms of norms and beliefs. The cumulative effect of such hiring decisions can cement the status quo, as new hires easily assimilate into pre-existing norms and values. For leaders who make those critical decisions, it's important to ask, am I hiring to maintain comfort and ease, or am I hiring to build a forward-thinking, future-oriented organization that breaks free from the gravitational pull of the status quo? One effective way to overcome the status quo bias is by creating a strong sense of urgency. When a team's performance is declining and a disruptive team member is affecting group dynamics, the negative situation catches our attention. Remember the negativity bias. The negativity bias means that negative events have a greater impact on our mental processes than neutral or positive events. In this case, the negativity bias can actually be leveraged as a tool for change. By highlighting the urgency of a deteriorating situation, leaders can shift the team's focus away from maintaining the status quo toward finding innovative solutions. In this context, the negativity bias serves as a catalyst, pushing team members to break free from complacency and actively engage in problem solving. Leaders don't have to be the only one who creates a sense of urgency because people tend to shoot the bearer of unwelcome news. You can hire external consultants to bring to the light the issue that need urgent attention. High-performing teams present a unique challenge to the status quo. Here, the sense of urgency is usually low as things seem to go well. Convincing the team that the change is needed can be an uphill battle. In this case, bring in an outsider to highlight areas for improvement or future challenges can be an effective move. Another way to facilitate change while navigating the brain's natural tendencies for stability is to design your default options wisely. A default option is the outcome that takes effect if no active choice is made. In behavioral terms, doing nothing is interpreted as consent for the default option. Given the brain's propensity to follow the least effort principle, the path that requires minimal cognitive resources, you can craft a default option that aligns with the desired change. For example, if you want to encourage more sustainable practices within your organization, make recycling the default behavior by placing recycling bins more prominently than trash cans. Employees would have to go out of their way to not recycle, engaging more cognitive resources to opt out. If you want to ensure that your organization is consistently setting aside funds for future innovation or emergency situations, you can make automatic savings the default option by setting up a system where a small percentage of the monthly revenue is automatically directed into a separate innovation and emergency fund. Unless you explicitly opt out or adjust the setting, this transfer will happen automatically every month. This capitalizes on the brain's least effort principle, where the path of least resistance is often the default. Start observing your decision-making process and those of others around you. See if you can spot instances of status quo bias. Please feel free to share your comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.